Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and for this video I wanted to show you a step-by-step process video of how I make a portrait. Actually, this is the first time that I try this, and I wanted to show you guys how I will go about this painting. Just as I did with our last video, I am using my watercolor pencils, and this time I will be using them like watercolors. So as you can see here that I lay them down using the wet on wet technique. You can look it up if you are not familiar, but basically it's wetting the paper first before applying the colors. Now I try to wet only the parts that I will color at the moment, and that is the face and the neck and some of the shoulder. And once you tried watercolor, you will find that the parts that you wet will only be the parts that the color will reach. So the color will not go out of that. And that really helps if you want to contain the color in a single shape or in a single form, so that you have more control over it. I also found that using the wet on my first wash will make the color flat. It will not produce these extra textures that I don't need yet. So it will really produce a nice flat wash that is very even all around. And if you're struggling with making those flat blocks of color, maybe you can try using the wet on wet technique as well. Now, once I finished all the first wash on both the faces, I let them dry, and you can see here on this next clip that it's already dry, and I'm just evening out the pigment because some colors, when I placed them in the beginning, it was staying on places that I didn't want, so I erased them. And now I'm putting on my second layer of color, and if you remember our values, then this will be the midtones, and I'm trying to avoid the places that I know will have the highlights, and those spots that I don't want the concentrated water color to go, I simply just brush them with water and the color will blend there nicely. You can see here, that's what I'm doing. I'm putting down the color and then I'm blending it with water. So if you want to try that, you can just put the color down and then wash your brush with clean water and then brush on the edges so that you can blend the edges together so you won't have hard edges. Sometimes hard edges are good, and you will see me later on put on hard edges, especially on those shadow shapes. But at the beginning, when we are dealing with midtones, I am just using the blending method so that we get smooth transitions. You can see here me adding more shadows under the eyes and more color on the neck and on the shoulders. And you can see that with the midtones, you can see a lot of change really, especially if you just try to remember to avoid coloring over the highlighted parts, because if you avoid that, then you will really add depth to your painting. As you might have also noticed, I'm using two different colors on the subjects that we are painting. I'm using a much more duller color on the guy, and I'm using more bright yellowish color on the girl, and I think that is matching on the photo that I'm using. And I wanted to experiment using different tones, different colors, using my color pencils. So I think that I really did a good job with the coloring. If you have no idea on the colors that you will use on your skin tone, maybe we will make a video on that. But what I tried and what really helped me was to swatch the colors first before painting them on. And I might not have shown it in the video, but I have a separate page on my sketchbook for testing out the colors and seeing which color will match my photo reference. And you can see me doing that here. And I'm also alternating painting the lady and the guy because I would want to wait for the colors on the other one to dry out first before I paint another layer. So I will color down the lady first and then I will color the guy, and that will help multitasking. That will help me make more artworks at a shorter amount of time because I don't have to wait all day for the girl to finish so I can continue. I will just have to work on the guy while I'm waiting for the colors to dry out on the girl. And I think that's a really nice also idea if you wanted to make a lot of artworks in a short amount of time. You don't want to wait forever. You can also try painting multiple subjects waiting for the other one to dry first while you are working on the other one, and alternating between the two. And I think that's a really nice technique if you are short on time and if you want to produce a lot of art very quickly. Now you can see me on this part adding even more midtones, I think, but on the nose, I think those are shadows already, because on the right side of the face of the woman, that is already a shadowed side. So I'm using much more darker pigments on that. What I do to darken the skin tone that I used earlier, I will add either a blue or a dark magenta, so that it will be darker, so that it will appear as shadows. And that's what we've talked about in our last video on color theory. If you want to darken a color, you can add its complement. So usually skin tones will be around reddish orange or probably yellowish orange, and the complements of those will always be blue or purple. So you can use either, and you can also experiment because some lighting conditions will produce different shadow colors for your subject. Sometimes if a subject is in a very blue environment, sometimes their shadows will appear more blue than they are brown. And you can observe the subject, you can observe your reference, you can observe the surroundings, so that you can have an idea on which colors to use. And you can see here I'm actually adding more shadows on the lady, and I think that the shadow on under her neck is very dark, so that will really add depth if I apply it. But what I realized later on when I was doing that, that the color was a little bit too cold for the face of the lady. So I'm gonna fix that later on. You will see it. I will be glazing that. But because the color on that shadow is very cold, that is the same color that I'm using on the guy. And I think that that color matches with the guy's skin tone, the dull color. It's not that saturated, it's a little bit cool. And for the lady, I wanted the shadows to be cool, so that it will I wanted the shadows to be warm, so it will match the rest of her face. Now on this part, you can see me glazing over her hair, because I will be coloring her hair next. And I'm skipping the highlighted parts that I see on the reference, because I want to keep it light. But looking back now, I think I should have added more color to that, but because it turned out too white, and I've avoided it, and it looks like that there are missing parts to it. But overall, because I have like just a right amount of values, I think it looked pretty well. It just looks like that it's been hit by a very strong light, so it looks white. Now on this hair on the guy, I added the first colors with a little bit mix of his skin tone and of the hair color, because if you really observe men's hair or short hair, you will see that the color of the hair will blend a little bit with the color of the skin. So because the hair is short, you can see more of the skin on that, so it will blend. So that's what I did on the first layer, and you can see me adding more layers later on, especially on the darker part. You can see me here using a cool color to mix with my base color, so that it will appear darker. And that's what I do to add depth to the hair of the girl. And you can see, even though I used blue, probably in the short clip that I showed you, even though it had blue in it, once you mix the colors, the blue will just darken the color. It will not appear as blue anymore. And I think that's really amazing how color theory works. Now, if you try to go ahead and just use browns, you can also do that. But I've tried that before, using only browns to darken, and I think that it makes the artwork look like it's a monotone artwork, like it's not that realistic, because you're only using brown colors. So what I do, I add a little bit of brown, and I add a little bit of cool colors. It might not look like it on the end result, but it has a very different end result if you add the complements to the base color, if you get what I'm saying here. Now on this hair of the guy, I already mixed black on that and a little bit of brown, so it's not pure black. And because the wash is very transparent, it's not that dark. Now, so that's what I did. Moving on to the eyebrows of the lady, I was very careful with these parts. Actually, I saved them for the last because they're very intricate details and I didn't want to mess it up. I was very careful, especially with the eyebrows later on. And you might not be able to see it anymore, but I actually did a lot of mistakes with the eyebrows. I was too careful that I actually did a handful of mistakes. I had to wash out the color because I didn't like how it it was placed on the face. So that's what I did, and the end result also is not that, I think it's not that good for me because I added the black later on, and I think I was not supposed to use the black because the whole face of the girl doesn't have any black on it. So adding black for the eyes really is just jarring, like it's not cohesive with the rest of the painting. Now you can see me here on this part. I am just glazing some warm colors, and that's what I said before. I will be fixing the shadows, and you can see that the shadows now look warmer because I glazed some warmer orange or red colors onto there. And I'm just adding more shadows on the side of the face of this guy because I wanted to add depth, and I will be adding more shadows also under his neck, so that will add more depth and more realism. The more depth you actually put to your painting, the more realistic it will look. And those dark parts, you have to be very careful because those parts that have really a high amount of contrast, the eyes of the viewer will be focusing on those parts more because they are very much more noticeable. Yes, those points of contrast. So you have to be careful when painting those, especially around the eyes, the lips, the nose. The viewers will focus a lot on those areas. So if you make a bit of mistake on those parts, it will be very noticeable very quickly. And which is why I would recommend, if you're doing a portrait like this, that you really know how to draw well, because the drawing will be an excellent guide for your painting. If your drawing is not that good, even if you use really good colors, it will not look right. If your proportions are wrong, if your details are wrong, especially the eyes, the nose, and the lips, then it will not look good in the end. So I would recommend that you just take your time on the drawing phase. And I actually took my time here drawing these faces, and I didn't record those parts anymore because I wanted to focus on the coloring. But I would recommend that you practice drawing, practice the shape of the face, so that you will produce really good paintings in the end. And you can see here, I'm just adding some final details around the eyes of the lady and of the guy as well. And you can see me just keeping a little highlight in the middle, like a little circle, because I don't have a masking fluid yet, and I think the masking fluid is how they add highlights, or other artists use white ink, but I also don't have that. So I'm just keeping the center of the eye to save it for a highlight. And this is a really difficult process, and I'm actually pretty glad that I did it well. Now you might notice, if you really look closely, that there are some mistakes here. There are some inconsistencies between the two eyes of the lady and the two eyes of the guy. But I think that if you look at it from afar, and if you don't like really take notice of it, it won't be that noticeable. But it is noticeable to me. Now I'm just adding some light brush strokes to define the ear. And I think that I wanted to keep the ears like very light, not that detailed. Actually, the more detail you put on a part of a painting, the more focus or attention it will get from your viewer. And because the ears are not my focus, okay, I didn't want to put a lot of detail on them, just simple brush strokes. And yeah, now I'm just adding a little bit more midtones around the upper part of the lip and those ridges under the nose. And those tiny details, especially around the eyes, really add to the believability of the painting. So if you can add them, I would recommend. Now I'm using also some darker colors to like suggest a cheekbone on there, and also some shadows under the hair because that was too white earlier. So I just added some dark colors to suggest a shadow. And yeah, I'm also darkening the shadowed parts of her chest. Yeah, and I think we're really nearing the end. And I'm also adding some ridges under the nose of the lady. And yeah, I really liked how these two paintings turned out. I really love how it looks so amazing. It looks so believable, though I still have some improvements to do. If you're an artist, you can comment down below if you have any suggestions on how I can improve. But really, I hope that you enjoyed the process of me making these two paintings just as much as I enjoyed making them. Now, I think that's about it for this video. If you have any suggestions on what topics we can do later on, comment down below. And I will see you on the next one. Bye!